Welcome to everybody, and especially to those who are attending their first Women in Architecture event, but thanks for everybody for joining. My name is Kate Gerson, and I'm a member of the WIA Programming Committee. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that those of us that are in the Vancouver area, which I assume is most of us, are on the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, and we thank them for sharing their lands with us. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, to follow our future events, please follow the link on our website, Wia Vancouver, WIA Vancouver, all one word, .org. And you'll find a link there. Women in Architecture is always looking for volunteers, communications, organizing events, special projects, etc. Again, there are links on our website. So if you are interested in getting more involved by helping us out in a volunteer way, that would be great. Please follow the website and you can send us an email through that. If you'd like to help by providing some financial support, you can do so by becoming a member. And again, that's through the website, and there is a suggested range of dollar amounts for that, but it's really kind of up to you how much support you'd like to give us, and that's a way of doing that as well. I want to remind everyone of the chat, and I think we have a raise hand. Do we have a raise hand function on this? Maybe not. Anyway, if you have comments or questions, please make use of the chat function. And of course, for getting your AIBC credit, please make sure that you identify yourself in the chat with your name, your email address, and your license number. If you know the license number, hopefully you do. We will save questions to the end of the presentation, but if questions are coming to you as Eva is presenting, feel free to put your question in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Also, I want to let everyone know that we are recording this presentation. It will be made available afterward through our website, but please be patient. Sometimes it takes us a bit of time to get it there, but eventually there will be a link to it from our website. As next week's site tour is sold out and has a wait list, we ask that anyone who has registered for it and is unable to attend to please let us know as soon as possible so that someone on the wait list can take your spot. We apologize that we have not been able, if you have not been able to attain a spot, we feel like we need to keep the numbers limited, somewhat limited for everybody to have a satisfactory experience. So we made the attendance up to 50 people, which will be enough of a challenge for everybody to be able to hear and so on. So we apologize if you weren't able to get a spot. I would like to be able to tell you about upcoming events, but we don't really know yet what's happening in September, if anything. In October, we are intending to have our annual Career Paths event that is currently being organized. We don't have a date for it yet, but it'll probably be late-ish in October. And again, if you want to know about upcoming events, make sure you get on our email list or follow us on various social media. And now for the real reason that you have joined us, I am very happy to introduce Eva Matsuzaki, who was born in Latvia and immigrated to New York as a young child. She received her Bachelor of Architecture from Cornell University, one of just 2 women in her graduated class. She began her career working for Diggaloo in Connecticut, where she met her husband, Kiyoshi Matsuzaki. Eva and Kiyoshi worked closely together for most of their careers.
Very closely.
In 1972, they moved to Vancouver, where Eva was first employed at McCarter Nairn and subsequently at Arthur Erickson Architects, where she spent 10 years. Upon leaving Arthur Erickson Architects, she founded Matsuzaki Wright Architects together with Jim Wright, another Erickson graduate, and later Matsuzaki Architects together with Kiyoshi. Eva was at the helm of many influential and award-winning projects, including leading the transformation of the old Vancouver courthouse into the current Vancouver Art Gallery, Les Terrasses condo tower in Vancouver, and the iconic CK Choi building at UBC, a benchmark in sustainable design at the time. Eva's work has been widely recognized for its innovation and use of sustainable design, receiving accolades such as the AIBC Lieutenant Governor Innovation Award of Excellence, the AIA Earth Day Award, Building Owners and Managers Association's Earth Award, and the BC Hydro Power Smart Award of Excellence. Eva has contributed significantly to both her community and the profession. Among other boards and committees on which she's served, Eva was a founding member of Women in Architecture in 1990 and was also the first woman to serve as president of the RAIC. In 2000, she was named a YWCA Woman of Distinction, and in 2018, Eva was duly honored with the AIBC Lifetime Achievement Award. We're honored to have Eva presenting to us tonight, and I now turn it over to Eva.
Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you to Wia for inviting me. It's a pleasure. I have to say that this was 45 years ago that I worked on this project. It was probably 6 years of my years at Erickson's, and been kind of 4 years on the art gallery and some other projects. But so this one was 6 years and 45 years ago. So if I'm missing pieces or exaggerating some, all right, I will go to the next slide. So here, I thought I'd start with a little background. In 1972, Mr. W.A.C. Bennett was our premier, and he'd been in that position for 20 years. So that's a long time for any of these folks. And he decided that kind of the model that he would like was the tallest building in Canada, which at that time was 55 stories, because, you know, the taller the better was his idea. Now, it happened to be that in 1972, kind of much to his surprise, the NDP won the election with Dave Barrett as the leader of the party. So we say that, we called him Wacky Bennett. Wacky, that he had a problem with his erection. It was kind of a failure. But Dave Barrett thought that a tall building like that would cast a big shadow and downtown, and that wasn't really the right answer. Now, this image that we have there wasn't already there. It's just not the tower is the idea. Okay. So next job was for them as the politicians and his advisors was to find an architect for this non-tower. And then looking back, now from 1972, looking back to 1963, the provincial government wanted to build a new university. and named Simon Fraser University, and they had a competition for a design. Now, anybody in the design field will appreciate that there were 3 requirements to make a submission, and that was you had to have a perspective, a plan, and an elevation, and that was it. And nowadays, I know when you have to do a competition, it's virtually you write a book. So this was very reasonable, and so 71 firms entered, and Erickson Massey won the project, and mainly because their concept was that different disciplines wouldn't have separate buildings, which you find in almost any university. They're usually scattered. You got one there for this field, you know, one for architecture, one for liberal arts, one for engineering. And this one brought all those together was the concept. And apparently all jurors thought this was absolutely the right answer. So this was the first big job that this office had. And this is an image of existing Simon Fraser University. And it's up on the hill in Burnaby and worth a trip if you haven't been there. There were other, I would call them major projects before the 1972 decisions, or 73. And this is one example, because it's one of my favorite, but it was in the design phase. And also right now it's closed because of earthquake upgrades. But once it's open, if you haven't been there, it's worth the trip. But other projects were happening, like Montreal Expo, Osaka Expo, Macmillan Bloedel downtown. So the firm had numerous very high profile projects. So all of this helped add the concept of giving the project to Erickson. So there's the star. There's Arthur. We all called him Arthur. Nobody ever called him Mr. Erickson, Arthur. So Arthur, well, you see the dates. And he went to school, to university, UBC, studied engineering for a while, then went to McGill for his Bachelor of Architecture, traveled for a few years, and then he taught at Oregon and UBC for 10 years. And during those 10 years, he designed numerous houses. Sort of that became his side job almost. Until the Simon Fraser job. That was the first large one. And I've always thought that because of the teaching years, Arthur was a great boss to work. I loved working with him, for him. He never insisted on anything. He always worked with you. And it's like in school, like a teacher or mentor would say, well, let's try this, or let's try mixing this A and B. And so it was never do it this way, my way. And I've always thought that came out of the teaching background. So where did this work happen? Well, the Erickson office was, AEA stands for Arthur Erickson Architects. So we always called it AEA. There's an absolutely ordinary gray box on the corner of 8th Avenue and Laurel, just off Broadway there. And but inside, it was a very introverted type of space. Outside, just a boring gray box. And then you go inside, and it's this wonderful wood columns and beams, and an open floor space with just ferns as our dividers. And then you could see that back wall had had little vines growing up the wall because there were beautiful skylights, so lots of natural light in there. And on the right, this was a model that we built bit by bit. It was 1/4-inch scale, and it was all made out of foam core and put together by straight pins, just like you would use sewing. And the reason that was so good was because if you wanted to adjust or change something, you just unpin it and adjust. So no glue. There was no glue in the place. And I think as a method of designing, this is very 3-dimensional and very flexible. So I'm a total fan of this method. As you can tell, my friends who are wizards at computer design and 3-dimensional, and you turn it, I'm not convinced. I think when you can touch it, it's like, to me, it's almost the difference of a Zoom presentation versus an in-person presentation. It's like, I can't hear your chuckles or your, oh no, did you, oh, there's none of that. And whereas when there's a model, I can touch it. Anyway, that's my little side story. So this is just a very quick concept, which I think is very simple, right? You'll see on the plan at the bottom on the right is the courthouse. And we also call them by blocks in the city grid. It's like the art gallery is on block 51. And so that's really the art gallery's block. And in the middle is what we call the park and courthouse on the right. And the concept was that those 3 blocks were pedestrian friendly. You didn't cross any streets. It was for the citizens. And so you could, at least in the concept, I'll talk about a little bit more, but Robson Street was intended to be closed. And then on the other street, which is Smythe, it's a big bridge that connects the park to the courthouse. And you could see it in the perspective there in the photo. It's like a big pool that comes across, and then on its right side, that's the pedestrian walkway. So it was, I'd say, that simple. And the main thing was, I think it was maybe 400,000 square feet of office space that was going to go into this 55-story tower. And so the concept was you just take it and lay it flat. And so there are windows under the planters, but it was clearly the priority was the park. The idea was to give the citizens an urban park. Oh yeah, and you stick the government somewhere underneath. Yeah, I'm sort of kidding a little bit, but it was very clearly the priority was to keep, and it's connected to the sidewalk. It's not like some buildings have parks, but they're on the top of the building, so you have to take an elevator or stairs. This one, it's 24/7. You can go there anytime. Oh, I wanted to give credit to some of the key people. Bing Tom was very instrumental in the early days, that whole concept of laying it down. Underneath there is Nick Milkovich, who's currently working on the Museum of Anthropology. I think his whole life he worked for Arthur, as long as Arthur was alive and working. And so he's still working on those. On the upper right, we're known as the Erickson Geezers, because this is a group of people that work together on Robson Square 45 years ago, and we're still good friends. Even tomorrow, we're meeting Spanish Banks for a picnic lunch. And it's just wonderful. I'd say for anybody, you're working in an office, remember your friends. They can be there for 50 years. And Cornelia Hahn Oberlander was our landscape architect, which was very important on this project. Okay, now this is the real thing from 45 years ago. And you have to understand this is 50% a joke and 50% for real. So almost all of us were in our 30s, full of confidence, full of sass. And so we could make fun of Arthur, we could make fun of ourselves. And so this is something in between. And so these were the rules. If you're going to design a piece of Erickson project, these were the rules. Rule number one, it had to be unique, right? So, and when we say the glossies, it means magazine, right? And unique meaning it's not a cookie cutter solution. Just because something had been done that way many times before didn't make that a first choice. So we always looked at outside the box. How else could it be done? Number two, slip and slide. I have to do it with my hands, right? So it's like this. And what that does is it gives motion to the pieces of the architecture. It implies that it can go on. It doesn't, and really number three, which says dissolve all corners, in a way means the same thing. If you have a block that ends, then that piece of architecture ends there. Whereas if you go slip and slide, it keeps going. So we called it Never Never Land. So I'll move to number four, cadence, which we took from one of Arthur's books. So it's kind of, again, kind of making fun of that word. Well, it really means rhythm, right? In this case, and impose visual order from the outside. Well, again, that's very sarcastic. But the important part there was that we would often try to do things in more than once or twice. If you do something 3 times, it creates a rhythm. So if you see 3 waterfalls or 3 sets of ramps or 3 planters, you start getting this rhythm into the architecture. Then PS was very important. When in doubt, when you didn't know what to do, just cover it with plants, and then you're done. And the note, and so this piece of paper still exists from 45 years ago. When we put down at the bottom, forgot to add optionitis, the meaning of that is that we always tried 2 or 3. When I say it had to be unique, it was never just, this is right. The process of design, and certainly in that project, was you always looked at 2 or 3 alternatives, maybe 6 alternatives. And then you looked at each one and thought, what are the pros and cons of it? And it might be, and that's what we would show Arthur. So the team would work on these options and show them to Arthur. And usually he'd suggest a hybrid. It was rarely, and then you'd find another hybrid of the hybrid. Though I have to say that pre-Google days, he would say, oh, there was a vineyard in southern Italy that had this wonderful trellis. And of course, we have no idea what he's talking about and have to guess. So you do options. you know, oh, yeah, that's. So this is just one of the many views of the project. Where you see the kind of brownie bands, that's where the waterfalls are. And for some reason, this photo is when there wasn't water running, which is a shame, but that's where it was. This image is taken very recently, which I apologize for my thumb being in the way. I forgot to ask the professional photographer to get in. But so this is Robson Street closed, which was always the concept. And it was just full of life. There were food trucks there. There were people in circles meditating. There were
This is a live
all sorts of
documentary
things.
about Robson Square. Oh, so this architect, she was the original architect that worked with Arthur Erickson. Oh, yeah.
Somebody didn't mute themselves. And I think it's an interesting thing because there was a lot of pressure on the city to keep Robson Street open because all the people that drove in downtown complained because it caused traffic problems. Yes, okay. So there's this competition between pedestrian and the automotive world. And, you know, it's whoever is louder is the problem. And often those in the cars are the ones who are appealing to City Hall. But I think this is great. So, this also shows the variety of spaces and landscape. This is now on the second level. And you can see there are smaller spaces and there's hedges and trees of different sizes. So this park has many different components. This is along Hornby Street. And talking about City Hall, the trees on the left there, this is the original scheme and what the landscape architect what they wanted were London plane trees, 2 rows, 15 feet on center. The city came back and said, no London plane trees. We want 1 row of trees, 30 feet on center. So there we go again, you know, bang, bang, bang. But you hang in there and tough it out. The ultimate compromise was that the city actually sold the plane trees that they had. And so they are the maples that they originally wanted. But the fact that it's 2 rows of trees really makes it a pedestrian alley, if you will. So I think that, to me, that was a very important accomplishment. And on the right, what you see is what we call them flying planters. There are the windows to the office space right behind these planters. And as I noted on the bottom there, it's memorial roses are the ones that kind of drape over the planters, and clipped laurel is what you're seeing right in the middle. And so that gives it a vertical element. So you get kind of a drapey element and a vertical. I think also from an architectural point of view, the thing that was terrific was that it wasn't full of a little pretty this and a little pretty that. It was a really strong statement. You could see it as far as the eye see. It's one plant choice, and it accentuated or to strengthen the architectural concept. And then on the 3rd level, there were even quieter spaces there. As you can tell, there are little jiggly spaces that with benches So it had the big, compared, let's say, to the Robson Street Plaza, then you go up a few levels and there are more intimate places. Now, I figured we're about halfway through the presentation. And so I took it upon myself to say, we need an intermission. So for an intermission, I'm going to read a poem. And it's a poem written by Mary Oliver, obviously called Wild Geese. And I'm going to read it once. Mary was a very kind of a quiet person that lived in nature, and she believed nature had so much to teach us. And so this is kind of her language, but then I want to go back and refer to it from an architect's point of view. So here goes. Wild geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Now, obviously, Mary was thinking about the world of nature, I think, but I started looking at it as an architect. And I said, you do not have to be good. Phew. All right. You do not have to be perfect, is the way I would rewrite it. And then where it says, tell me about despair. Well, that's the client. The client is talking about the budget and the time and all these difficulties. And I will tell you mine. Mine is I need more time. An architect I need to study those alternatives. I can't just churn out the drawings. So that's my despair. I think the other one that really matches is talking about the wild geese. And as you all probably know, geese fly in this big V in the sky, and they are all drafting on each other. So it's teamwork. And to me, that represents the team of people that work on any project, whether it's architects and the team within the architects or our consultants. Everybody's supporting. And then with wild geese, when the goose in the front gets tired, it just drops to the back and somebody else takes over the lead. So I think that applies to architects also. So regretfully, Mary had about similar lifespan as Arthur. So she's already has passed away, but I think she'd understand what we're trying to do here. Back to Robson Square. The mound. Now this is right, as you can tell by seeing the art gallery annex behind there. This is right off of Robson Street. And the mound is all of a sudden something that breaks the pattern. Everything else is rectilinear. But then intentionally, you just break the rules. So then this thing just spills out. And it's got trees on it, and there's a pathway through it. So you can go up to the second level just through this little pathway on the mound. And it's got, the note there says it has that variety of landscaping on it. Pines, maples, rhodos, and vines. This I picked because it's an example of slip and slide, where you can see the larger element is higher and more forward. And so nothing matches intentionally. So again, you are allowing them one to go past the other. Also, it's an opportunity to say that those planters, it was very important for the landscape architect, Cornelia, to come up with a lightweight soil. Because if you took a typical soil that you would see in planters, it becomes too heavy because it's cantilevered. And so this is where working with the structural engineer makes all the difference. So they worked together and Cornelia developed this lightweight soil and finally found a match of what could work with that. So a good chunk of it is this mixture of, I think it was perlite and soil, and then the growies. And the other piece of it is that those planters have drip irrigation. So you can picture there's just a pipe, but instead of spraying, which was often the way, this was drip. And again, you're coordinating with the mechanical engineer here. As architects alone, we could not have solved these problems. So it's a great way to show how we work together. Now come the famous stramps. Like, these have been written about in many different places, and they are controversial. Well, they're controversial because it's there are people that say it's not safe, particularly for wheelchairs. And I totally agree. I think this is 45 years ago. I think if we were doing it today, we would be doing a much better job. That somewhere there nearby, we would have a good, safe way for a wheelchair to go up and down. But for instance, for me as a senior citizen, I rather go down the ramp than up and down the stairs. So I think it's sculptural, this idea of blending a ramp and stairs, and it hadn't been done before, so it was unique. And it's like the fun part of the team that worked on these things was that we'd give everything names, like it was flying planters and boxes. And the boxes here are the bookends to the stramps. And they particularly had small trees. So you get a Japanese maple or magnolia, some vertical element to it. And then the straps in between. And the other day when I was there were lots of people sitting on them just as a place to hang out. And you do see people with baby strollers or even skateboarder guys having fun. But it has been controversial because of the safety issue. From architects would appreciate that, again, these battles with bureaucracy is when we first presented these stairs, the building inspector wanted us to put handrails every 5 foot 4 inches on center, because that was like an exit stair. And it took us forever to convince him that these are not exit stairs. They're just part of the landscape, and the exit stairs were elsewhere. So that there's just the one set of handrails for those people that like it for a sense of security. So that's our famous stramps. Now, I would like to talk about another topic that is often controversial in this project, And that is the discussion about entries. And this one is the art gallery on the Georgia Street side. And it has this, what I call very classical entry, right? It's the ones that the Romans and the Greeks would love. It's like, if you're approaching this building, there's no question where you're supposed to go in, right? It's symmetrical, it's grand, it has presence, and it's a way to do things, but it's not the only way, right? So for the art gallery, when we worked on that, well, again, I'll go back for a second. When we looked at first at the art gallery, we said, well, okay, you could enter the art gallery this way, but then how does anybody with disabilities get there? So you'd have to do an elevator on the side or something, and then said, well, maybe we just do it at ground level. So it just has this little canopy, little sign, Vancouver Art Gallery. And then, or the other one off the Robson Street Plaza, again, on grade. So you can just go in directly without we abandoned the big grand stairs. Then there's UBC. UBC said our students cannot find a way into our classroom. Now I said, and these are university people, but that's just my point. I think this sign is a little bit of an overkill. It's like, really? You need to see it from 2 blocks away? Okay, nobody asked me, and now somebody else is actually looking at these things. But obviously, it's almost like those grand stairs. It's like, I'm here. It's very loud. So I wanted to talk about quiet entries. In particular, the one on the right with the little stone path. This is the entrance to, if anybody's been to Japan, there's the Katsura Palace. And this is really a very grand, almost very, it's a very special place in Kyoto, Japan. And you go through a little gate, and then you come down this path, and the only thing in front of you is this little pine tree. So you stop and you admire the little pine tree. And then you take that little path to the right. And then there's a gate. So it's like the total opposite. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet and beautiful. And I always feel that somehow it's the European culture that tells us to be loud about it. And Arthur spent a lot of time studying Japan in Japan and studying it. And so I also think that whole concept of Robson Square has a lot of influence from the Japanese approach to these things. So I think a lot of us really prefer this way. My humble opinion. So here's one that did come out of the Robson Square team. And we say, here's the entrance to the provincial court offices. So there's this little sign, right? There's the same, where the people are coming, that's that same double row of trees, Alec. And then there's this little sign. Oh, and yeah, and the address is there. So, and yeah, you have to find it. You have to know where you're going. Oh yeah, Hornby Street. Then when you go under that planter, then you hit a glass wall that just has the lettering on it. And we're seeing a reflection of the court, sort of a courtyard that's right behind it. And we've heard stories of people go there and have dance classes and have other things where they like the mirror effect. So this becomes a public place. And yes, there's an entry to the courts, but it also is very comfortable for the citizens that are going to use it. And even most of us have seen this on some news program, but here's the law courts. It's not in the middle. It's not axial. It's at the very end of the building. So you're entering from the end and not face on. And I think it also comes from that same vocabulary of not being loud. It's just over on the side. I wanted to include a section of the courthouse because it too has, where it says the courtroom, it's on each level. The courtrooms are a little bit back and it's staggered. Right? It slips and slides horizontally. And the terrace was a place where there's greenery and where you could have your meetings with your lawyers or at break. So instead of going into some enclosed room, you have this airy place with lots of plants. And the concept is to de-stress. Because for anybody, the experience of going to court is stressful. And so the whole way, and I think it's the architectural decisions that help de-stress it. The Great Hall was also an idea that it's a public place. It's not, it doesn't belong to the courts per se. And so there's an image of that Great Hall. And it's used for concerts. There have been celebrations of life, weddings. It can, any sort of public type event can happen there. So again, it wasn't in the program. Like it, you get the program that says we want 35 courtrooms and so many meeting rooms to have with your lawyer. And then it's the architecture that allows you to free it up. So it's all daylit and airy. Well, where are we going here? All right, so I just wanted to quickly go back to this, and because now you've seen all these images, and so it's kind of a quick review of the uniqueness, slip and slide, not having strong corners, and the rhythm. It's like the stramps, right? There were 3 sets of them. And we certainly covered everything with Broies. And I've talked about optionitis. So maybe, I think this is my last slide here. And on this project, these were kind of our priorities. And I think that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just, there's the consciousness about it. And so you start out with a project that says, okay, we're doing a government office building. It's not going to be a tower, it's going to be horizontal, but it's government. And then we change it and say, no, it's really for the citizens of the city. And as you can see down the road, it's not a tower, it's a park. The cars, too bad. They don't like not crossing, but the pedestrians become the priority. Practical, well, you could say, well, who needs that grand hall, the Great Hall in the courthouse? But it was creative, predictable, or variety. Surprise, that's like the Mound is a good example. And then so many pieces of architecture are objects. They're kind of, I call them peacock architecture. They sort of say, I'm fancy, come look at me. And it's just itself, right? It's like a little gem. And then in this case, it's not, it's totally architecture and landscape are totally meshed. You don't know where one starts and the other ends. Now, I think often on other projects, there are some hybrid or compromises, but I think this kind of clarifying our priorities is very important. And then I wanted to add that no matter what variety you have, that now we have to, number one has to be the health of the earth. We're just seeing all this. It breaks my heart to see all these problems with the fires and even Yellowknife today. 20,000 people have to leave because of the fires. So our architecture can also help heal, try to heal the earth. So now I want to do something that has nothing to do with Robson Square and has everything to do with women in architecture. And oops, can you see the poem up there? There. It's a poem by Rupi Kaur, who's a young woman, probably around 30 years old, wrote this poem recently called Timeless. And I think it will inspire especially younger women who that things get better with age. You know, it's like sometimes we regret getting older, and I think this poem addresses that. So let me give it a try. They convinced me I only had a few good years left before I was replaced by a girl younger than me, as though men yield power with age. Women grow into irrelevance. They can just keep their lies, for I have just gotten started. I feel as though I just left the womb. My 20s are the warm-up for what I'm really about to do. Wait till you see me in my 30s. Now that will be a proper introduction to the nasty wild woman in me. How can I leave before the party started? Rehearsals begin at 40. I ripen with age. I do not come with an expiration date. And now for the main event, curtains up at 50. Let's begin the show. And I want to talk to this young, talented poet and say, next time, could she add a little bit about the 60s and the 70s? And then we'll have it all covered. Thank you, Rupi. Okay, one more thing that probably Kate might want to add to, but what happened? No, it's not. One more slide. What happened? There it is. There it is. Okay. All right. This is a poster that we had 25 years ago, 24 years ago now. There was a national conference of architects in Vancouver, and we had workshops for women in architecture, and it was a big success. Lots of people came. There were people from Ontario and other provinces, the prairie provinces. And next year, that same national organization, the RAIC, Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, is coming back, is doing their national conference in Vancouver. And it'll be the 25th anniversary. So I want to plug that WIA does something similar and put our name out there again. And I think it's a way of supporting women in the profession, which even though things have gotten better, I still think we have a long way to go. So let's go, girls. Let's do it. That's me. And questions and answers? Questions are welcome. I don't know if I can do the answers. I'll try.
Thank you, Eva. We're going to have a bit of a challenge now because we're both in the same room. So I know you're getting an echo.
Can you mute? me?
Should we move further away from one another? Might that help?
Mute on and off.
Okay. So, please put any questions that you have in the chat, but in the meantime, I do have a few for you to get things started, Eva. One was you briefly mentioned budget and schedule. And these days, that is such a huge part of every project. I'm guessing that it wasn't quite such a huge part in those days, but I'm guessing that those were still issues, and it would be interesting to hear a little bit about how you survived that part of the.
Okay, so can you unmute me?
Yeah, well, I think there was a budget and there were schedules. I think there was this energy, like I think that was the difference. That it wasn't a tedious thing. And I mean, I talked about where we had to battle City Hall or those, but we didn't roll over and miss the budget, or I don't know about the schedule. I don't remember whether it was a tight schedule or not. The building did open in phases. In other words, the courthouse opened, I think, a year later, and Robson Square, the middle part, the provincial offices were first, then the courthouse, and then the art gallery was 3 or 4 years later. So actually, by dividing it into pieces, I think made it more manageable. I don't know if I really answered the question, but it was it wasn't a crisis ever.
Great. I see somebody is saying they would love to hear about the people who built the project and the relationship you had with them while working on the project. And I'm sure it was not an easy construction. So yeah, that would be interesting to hear about. I don't know, you were involved at least in the art gallery construction, weren't you?
Yes, I was involved with the art gallery, but the art gallery wasn't that complicated really, because the main thing that we did was we entered on the ground floor, which used to be almost like a basement and storage room, because you came up those grand stairs and the courthouse really began on the upper floor. So we now came in on that bottom floor where the entrance is and the shop, and cut out that big hole that then has the rounded stairs that go up. That was the architectural piece of it. The rest was just kind of clearing out the space. So really, we had very few problems on that project, and even way back when, I think we did some fun recycling type things where the courtrooms had marble wainscoting on some of the walls. And if the next time you go to the gallery, you look at the floor, and we cut those into 1-foot strips, and that became the flooring of the entry hall. And it's recycling, and it just sort of happened. It wasn't. I don't think we were as conscious of that saving the recycling, but anyway. So that part, and I honestly don't remember the contractors on the Robson Square side, but you know, I think a lot of it is really structural, right? Like that's the bones, and that was all designed it's concrete and rebars. So I don't remember, again, things that didn't work. I mean, I think the only thing that might have happened is if timing became awkward, you know, if something took longer than expected. But nothing happened that would be like a disaster or major problem.
Great.
Muted again?
One thing that I'm curious about, I know some architects tend to design more from the outside in and others more from the inside out. And I kind of get the feeling there different parts of this project were probably more outside in and other parts more inside out, but it would be nice to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I would say absolutely, absolutely true. Robson Square, well, I mean, that's where we made fun of the rule of cadence of you do the rhythm from the outside in. And no question that block 61, the Robson Square, the priority was the park. And so it was, and that's why we gave everything names. And I was in charge of the skin team, right? So the skin of how you develop the outside and those layers of where the planters go and where's the rhythm of that and where the stairs went, that was all from the outside. And really the office space was big, wide open, that kind of undesignated strips. And there were just cores of where there would be exit stairs and washrooms. The courthouse, I would say, was really very much from the inside, like how the court functioned. There was a good story would be that from Arthur's point of view, who once got stuck in the courthouse, I think in Montreal, he was touring them and got behind somewhere. But the concept originally was that you would enter the courtroom on the side. And again, I would call it the quiet entrance so that you're not facing the judge. You know, like in every courtroom, you come in the doors, the big doors, and who's there on the podium but the judge, you know, the Lord. And then so the team and really Arthur in this one wanted to come in sideways so that it wasn't that grand axial thing. Well, the judges would not hear about that. They were not interested. And only the Chief Justice Nemetz, was in support. So in the end, there was a compromise of, I think, 2 or 3 of the courtrooms do have side entrances. But of the 35, the team of judges were, nope, they wanted their grand entrance. So and also the whole idea of de-stressing and the light and airy feeling, yeah, that I would say all came from the inside. So it was, and the art gallery really, it was an interior job. The outside, the only thing that really got added was where the terrace is, where the restaurant is on the 2nd floor. That was an insert in the exterior. Everything else is interior. So really a combination.
We have a couple of questions from the audience. One is about Cornelia. When did Cornelia Oberlander join the project, and can you speak to her main contributions and her working relationship with Arthur?
Well, that I feel very comfortable with answering because I worked with her a lot, and she and Arthur meshed very well. Like Arthur understood a lot about landscape architecture, and she understood what the architect is trying to achieve, and worked with that. She came on to the project, I would say once the basic forms were already in place. Certainly the building on its side and some terracing. And to begin with, there was another landscape architect named Robillard who was involved, and he was like a plant specialist, if I remember right. And we had two people in the office. One was a landscape architect, fully degreed and educated, and another one who was a helper. So there were two people full-time in the office. And then Cornelia would come, whatever it was, once a week or twice a week, and would have design sessions. But I think, to me, the real strength of Cornelia's contribution was her research skills. She really and that was true on other projects too, that it was like that lightweight soil. It didn't already exist somewhere and you just pick soil A or soil B. She did the research on how one could achieve that. And also which plants were appropriate for which place. I hope that answered the question. So as a bottom line, I think it was a very important role and contribution in the Robson Square. But there were also, it was like the geese. In a lot of it, she was in that lead, but there were, architects and landscape architects behind supporting her, and then sometimes they would lead the way. So I always accentuate the teamwork.
Thank you. A couple of other questions. Are there any elements you might change looking back?
I do think, at least from all the conversations, the biggest one would be on accessibility on Robson Square. I don't think we did a great job on that. And I think we would do it differently. I don't know how. I need to study options. I need time. But otherwise, what would we do differently? I think the biggest problems are things like that aren't really from the architects. I think maintenance is a big problem, because it's like almost any building. Nowadays, the budgets for maintenance are just too small. I mean, this building is almost 50 years old, and somebody complains that they have to change the waterproofing, or some of the plants need so much trimming, and that is such a bother because they have to spend X dollars on pruning. Well, it's that's part of being the owner, is the way I see it. And with time, and then I went to the courthouse recently to see how the inside those terraces were working, and when I walked into that great hall, some security guy came up to me right away and said, "Well, you can't take any pictures, right? Put your camera away." It's like, well, maybe that's how times are now, that there's so much concern about security. But well, you probably know from the way I talked about the entries, I'm such a strong believer in those quiet entries. I don't know why there's this need for it being grand and loud, but anyway, so I wouldn't change any of that.
Great. Well, I think given the time, that's
Mhm.
probably a very good place to finish up. And we look forward to additional questions when those of us that are there in person next Thursday. And I want to remind those that are going to be there in person that we changed the meeting spot from what we had originally said. So we now will be meeting on the Robson Street side, directly next to that entrance that Eva showed in the photo, on the steps next to the art gallery entrance. And we'll have a couple of Wia umbrellas, yellow umbrellas there to help draw your attention. And a huge thank you to you, Eva. You look like you're wanting to add something
I wanna
here.
know if people could ask
Ask questions
questions
by-
or
People ask questions by emailing or-
So
Eva's
Eva's asking
asking
if
if
people can ask questions in the interim. So please feel free to email through the WIA website if you have questions that you would like to for Eva to be able to respond to at the tour. So we'll try and monitor those emails. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and keep reading your poetry.